Welcome, everybody, to Write Better Together. I'm Jon Meyers. Hey, look, everybody. It's Emily Brooks.
Hello, Jon Meyers.
Hey, Emily. What are we gonna be talking about today?
Well, we have quite the list yet again. We're gonna have more call to action responses. We're gonna have our Hey Jon Meyers segment where I try to stump Jon Meyers. We have our big idea, and today's big idea is. Do you want to say it?
Sure. Today's big idea is every moment that you've lived in your life, every experience you've ever had, contributes to this very moment right now.
There you go. I knew you could say it better than I could. Then we have our call to action and our closing.
Awesome. Tell me to get out of my bubble or something.
Yeah. So, Jon Meyers, how have you gotten out of your bubble recently?
Funny you should mention it, because in a previous episode, you were in Dauphin Island, and in this episode, I want to talk about. I just got back from Chicago, and then in the next episode or two, Emily and I are going to the Southern Oasis Film Festival for an appearance, and in Sevierville, Tennessee.
So
So
we're getting out of our bubbles.
yeah, exactly. We're living we're modeling for you. We're setting an example
We're doing it.
to get out of get out of your parents' basement and actually go out in the real world to write something. Speaking of parents' basements,
Yeah, wait a second.
there's gonna be first of all, Emily doesn't like that phrase, but I am allowed to use it because right here you can see that's actually my parents' basement. Because I went there this weekend while I went to Chicago. Both my parents are passed. However, that's the house. Actually, I never lived in that house, but it's the house that they've lived in ever since I went to college. We graduated from high school and went to college. While I was in high school, they were building this house that you saw, and then so I lived in the house next door where the neighbors live now. And but my two younger brothers grew up in that house. I did not go over to my neighbor's house and excuse me, can I take a picture of my bedroom from 100 years ago? And so I like our podcast is just like I don't know. I reversed. I did the opposite of our advice. I went back into my bubble. I went back into my parents' basement. By the way, this is actually look at that charming young man. That was me.
Those of you watching on YouTube get to see a lovely picture of younger Jon Meyers.
Which we will put that in like under when we put this episode up, we'll put it like on the Facebook page or something.
Yeah, it'll be like in the show notes or something.
Yeah, and so that's what I look like when I live next door to this picture that you saw. So the reflection upon that is, besides the fact that I ignored our podcast advice and went back into the bubble, is there was no one, literally no one, to support anything creative in that house. It was a sports house. I mean, I love my parents, but my mom was an accountant, worked for a bank. My dad was a sports guy. My brothers are sports guys, and there's creativity in both of those. So I actually said that a little bit more severe, but it's not creative where you're creating. We'll have a art versus product conversation some other day, but no, there were no writers, there were no artists, there certainly were no cartoonists, and no screenwriters, and in my family, period. And so such creative endeavors were almost even frowned upon. And so I think in 5th grade, my parents got called into school because 5th grade Jon Meyers was whenever I wrote in cursive, the dot over my eyes on every lowercase I drew little cartoon mosquitoes. And so if there were 50 eyes on a page, there were 50 mosquitoes on the page.
I love it.
And I
I
got in
love it.
trouble. And so my teacher calls my parents and into a conference because, oh, what a crime. I was
Oh
drawing cartoon
no.
mosquitoes all over my paper. And of course, my parents sided with with my teacher, and I got in huge trouble. And so that's where I was going with that. And that and I know there's people listening that have a similar non-supportive environment for their creative endeavors.
Mm,
It was put that book down and go grab a baseball. And no, that's not that's not who I was. And which is fine if you're the baseball person, that's totally fine. But that's not who I was. And it was not only was it not encouraged, it was discouraged. Within a year, my first time I had to get a social security card when I was some little kid, however, whatever that youngest age is that you get a social security card, I don't even know. But it came up recently, and I had made $500, and I'm like, how did I make $500 when I was 12 or 14? I don't remember what that was. And because that was when I got my social security card. Well, some guy paid me $500 to draw a cartoon on a license plate. He was like he made novelty license plates.
oh,
Yeah. So little Jon Meyers made $500 with his creative endeavors, and
amazing.
I don't do politics. Period. It was a political. My career as a political cartoonist started when I was 14 or whatever, and so I won't tell you what it was, and it wasn't anything torrid or terrible, but it was political, and I don't do that. And so that's why I had to get a social security card. So that was my first job was a creative endeavor.
Love it.
And so uh, that's the end of my story. Respond upon that,
Well, I love it
Emily.
because so I didn't know you were going to talk about this, but I also think about this all the time because my husband John and I are not sports people at all. So I'm like, well, what if I have uh what if we have kids who are really into sports? Like I don't want to do the opposite to them. Um I want to be supportive with whatever they want to do, but I hope that if we have young listeners that they know that they can find communities who are supportive um, of their creative endeavors, even if their families don't understand it.
And then now you just scared me a bit. So if I had a sports inclined child, so I'm not gonna say people's names or what school, but so my brother is. I mean, that's all he's ever done. So my brother is a baseball coach. My middle brother, and so I guess my child would be spending a lot of time over there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because tag uncle here, do something with
Yeah.
this child.
Think, what do
And
I
I
do?
mean, because he's done it his whole life, he's good at it, right? So put your
Yeah.
kids around people that are good at. The way to succeed is when you spend time around people with the job that you want to have, and
Yes.
so uh, yeah, I would not be much help for my baseball playing child.
Yeah. We have call to action responses
Oh, we do. Thank
or
you
a
for telling me that.
response.
We have a response. So last in a previous episode, um, we had asked for the question: if money were no object and training were no object, what would you do? We read a bunch in a previous episode, and I have a new one from David Halchester. You may know David Halchester if you follow screenwriting. Um, get ready for these titles. He writes domestic thrillers that you've seen on Lifetime a million times,
Oh,
and
wow.
like Swim Instructor Nightmare, Lies My Sister Told Me, The Other Woman, like Marriage Killer, the mysterious woman next door that breaks up their marriage. But in the summer, we've talked already about having him as a guest because
Mhm.
we're those aren't like they're on TV, so they're edgy, and so you wouldn't put them in like all ages family category, but they're not like terrible. Like it's not like it's X-rated or anything. And but he's writing a Christmas film, and so
Nice.
he's writing his first all ages family film, and so when he's farther along with it in the summer, uh, uh, we'll have him on as a guest
Awesome.
sometime. Once he's just starting now. So once he's made some inroads in it, and we'll talk about the differences, but like how you write this for Lifetime and how you write this to be family friendly. So his answer to if money were no object and training were no object is. So I'm scrolling through here. We go. So David's response was, I didn't even mention. So he's from Los Angeles, but he lived in London, but he doesn't have a British accent, and but he lives in Japan for I don't know the last 10 years, and so when we talk, he's like, "Oh, it's so refreshing to hear an American voice," because he's surrounded by Japanese voices all the time, and so sometimes he forgets words, like
Oh, interesting.
because you're immersed in a different
Yeah.
language, but that his native language is English. All right, um,
Interesting.
and obviously I don't have a British accent either. If money were no object, training were no object, David says, my wildest dream would be to bring my period drama Tilly to life. Tilly is based on a 1904 novel. I'll tell you why I'm chuckling in a second. By Helen Martin. It is an overlooked masterpiece, and my screenplay, which was placed as a finalist multiple times, is ripe for production. The only thing preventing me from doing it myself is a budget. I'd give anything to bring my story to the screen. It is a powerful story about a farm girl who wants an education and not just the choices she's given. It deserves attention. So we talked in a previous episode that I write a lot of things from 1899 to 1903, and I actually have a character named Tilly who in one of the films I've written, and he has a Tilly who's the protagonist in one in 1904. So I'm sure we both did research to find out that was a popular name, maybe.
Nice.
I don't want to speak for him, but that's how my Tilly wound up. She's a teenager, 18 or 19 or something, and so I had to go back. Let's say it was 1903. I went back 18, 19 years to see what the popular names were of that.
I'm
And
sure
then
we've all looked up names. Like it looks like we're all having babies. Like at least for me, like I'm always looking up baby names, but it just for like story ideas.
I've never had a baby.
I just want to add too that I love the confidence of someone who says my story deserves attention because
Oh, I do
I'm just
too.
like, "Oh, it might be good. I don't know. I don't know. You tell me." But I love just that confidence of like this is a powerful story and it deserves attention.
And
I think we can all do that.
David's very humble, and but
Mm,
he's had so much success,
yeah.
and but that, speaking of babies, that's like his baby. That one hasn't been made yet,
Yeah.
where he's had these other thrillers made. So
I
there
hope
you
you
go.
get to make that film. And if
I,
you
I
do, please let us know.
so yeah, we will. We want to be the first to know,
Yes,
David.
for sure.
All right, what's next?
Hey, Jon Meyers.
Oh no,
Do you know
no,
about
I don't.
so well
Whatever
you
this is,
might.
I don't.
You might. Do you know about Incan Kipu?
Why, yes, I have a book right here. I'm the leading expert on the internet of whatever you just said. No, I don't.
So I'm sure you're familiar with um like like original writing, like cultures discovering how
Yeah,
to share information. So they're doing hieroglyphics and image-based writing. Well, turns out the Incans, for a long time, we thought had no form of writing, that they were not writing at all. But it's been recently discovered over the past like maybe 6 years that they were writing, but they were using strings. So you think about in that area they were using they had a lot of fibers. They had alpaca and camel, and so they were making a lot of thread, and they actually would string all of those together and make a tap, kind of like one of those wall hangings that like everybody has now. Um, but each string was twisted in a certain way. It was a certain color. It was a certain type of fiber. It was had knots in it that would. It was basically a language.
These have to be true, Emily.
What if one
No,
day I just come up with a crazy fact that's not true, but I'm just like trying to convince you that it's true?
yeah, that could happen someday. No, I believe you. I can't remember his name, but there's this entomologist guy on Instagram, and one of his hobbies is that he collects weird languages. And there's a
Mm.
language, and so I do WriterCon as a speaker every year in Oklahoma City, and they have their own language. And I actually told the publisher, my editor's father, about this language, and he didn't know about it, so I stumped him with it. And so, but this language, and it has a name,
It's not
which will
Jonesian,
be in
is
the
it?
show notes because I don't remember. Um, and but it is ba- it's all based on actions, and so
Oh.
it's based. There are other languages like that, but this one is based on breaking and entering actions. And so if you break into someone's house through the air conditioner window, that means a certain word. And then if
Mm.
you break down the back door and enter through the kitchen, that means a certain word. And so
Oh.
there's it's a formal language, and there's just like you know how people study Klingon and from
Yeah,
Star
yeah.
Trek. There's a whole guide of what every breaking and entering action, what word it represents.
That's insane.
So, I know. So
I
check
love
out the
though
show
just
notes, and we'll tell you
learning.
what the name of that is. And then I don't even understand what word you said that where you
Well,
stumped me
to
of
be
the
fair, I
thread
don't even
language.
know if I pronounced it correctly. It's spelled Khipu, and I'll share the article about it in our show notes so that y'all can, because there's like a little picture and stuff, which I'll also
And you
put up.
can throw it up on the place where I
I
put
will.
the picture of my parents' house.
I will do that.
All right.
But we're talking about the topic of things, in your past leading you to where you are now. And it's the same thing with language and the way that our cultures have developed is we started somewhere. And
Yeah,
somehow
exactly.
we ended up with what we have now. And I know as an English speaking person, I wish things had gone a little differently with our language. I can't even imagine trying to learn English. It's so complicated, but I
It
love
is
it at the
very
same
complicated.
time, I guess.
What if you could speak a different language, what would it be?
Oh, that's really hard. Well, I do know quite a bit of Spanish, mostly because where we live, that's like if you're likely to meet somebody who speaks a different language, they're probably speaking Spanish. So it's very convenient. I would love to learn sign language.
Oh, yeah, so would I.
Yeah,
But you wouldn't
that's
want to learn the breaking and entering language.
no, not really.
All right.
All right, so
So today is the big idea.
sorry, I
No,
didn't
go
mean to
ahead.
interrupt you. Well, yeah, so you came up with a big idea today, so I'm really curious what inspired that for you.
Um, so the big idea is what made me think of it. So the big idea is every moment. So first of all, this I have life tenants, and I said in an earlier episode that whenever a life tenant comes up, I've never put them all on a list. And so the
Mm.
big idea is actually one of my life tenants. We'll start collecting them, and then and I don't want to force them to happen, and so I want them to come up organically. Um, and so a year from now, we'll have this little list of some of my life tenants all in one place, and I will be happy about that because I've never collected them. And so uh, the life tenant slash big idea for this episode is every moment that you've ever experienced in your entire life impacts this moment right now. So even the last 20 minutes of this podcast have influenced what I'm saying right now. And if you think about it, I'll use that as an example. Look at the pair, like Emily. I don't know what Emily's going to say. Emily doesn't know what I'm going to say, and that's intentional. But look at the threads that are already going through there. Threads of language.
Mhm.
The fact when I said about David Chester that he was in he's an American from Los Angeles, but then he was in London, and now he's in Japanese, and then his language, like he doesn't hear English very often, and so
Yeah.
there's all these threads from the things that we've said,
Yeah.
even the things all the way back to me dotting the mosquito or the letter I with the mosquito. All
Yes.
those are connected, and we didn't plan that. And so, as writers, as we are observers of the human condition, you 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 have to have head on a swivel where you're just looking for these things because they're everywhere. And like I just listed off 5 of them off the top of my head, and I wasn't looking
Yeah.
for them. And just yeah, in the last 20 minutes. Go ahead.
Well, you also started with talking about like your not your childhood home, but your parents' home that you lived next to, and like that's a part of your past, and then talking about the experience you had as a kid and not having that support for your artistic endeavors. That also shaped your how you probably do art today.
Yeah, exactly. And it, it's it's an awareness of I want to say an awareness of your surroundings, but
Mhm.
there's also things that aren't visible. It's the awareness of internal emotions and things like that that you can't just see in your surroundings. And but there just everything. The world is your textbook, people. The I think that might be another life tenet. Now that I've said 2 in the same episode. um, there, I think it is, and so everything's connected by design, but we have to pay attention to notice those things. When a previous episode of this podcast turned into bird talk, and there was birds here, birds there, birds everywhere. It was like Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. I'm
Oh my
telling
god.
you, they were everywhere. And I learned so much. It was 100% all new to me. And but there were like these things I said about uh or the author's book that was Nighthawk, and Emily was like, yeah, and we didn't even point out Canary Islands, like someone was from
Yes.
Canary Islands. That was We didn't plan any of that, but it was all bird centric in that episode. And look, it just came up in this episode. um I think the thing, and then we can move on to the next thing after you respond to this thing that's going to come out of my mouth. I think that when I was trying to come up with the big idea for this episode, I think the impetus for that was I used to work for this guy named Mike Moretta, and back in my corporate life, I used to have a corporate life for a while too, and we won't talk about that. And uh, I became his boss actually at some point. But Mike Moretta was one of those guys. He's just like the most jovial. Everyone loved him, and I wasn't that way back then. But I am like now. Everyone just loves me, and but
The
I've
I
become
love the
Mike
compliment.
Moretta. But there's a point to that. So our offices were on. Keep my hand in the screen. Our
He's
offices
pointing
were
to the
on
ceiling. His offices were in the ceiling.
in the attic. No, our offices were on the 3rd floor of this building, and the parking lot. So when you went to lunch, you had an hour to go to lunch. The parking lot was 3 stories down, and um, I could get to it in 9 minutes. Right, so you had 9 minutes to your car, 9 minutes back. You had to go somewhere and get lunch in whatever that is, 30 or 60 minus 18. And this is not a math podcast, and so no problem. Like that was easy. But if you went to lunch with Mike Moretta, that was impossible because from the 3rd floor to the front door of the parking lot, it would take 45 minutes because he was so popular. Everyone would stop and talk to him. and
Yep.
and your lunch hour was over. And so, and then I think about that because now that happens to me. I won't say the building, but Emily knows the building. So my office was in the basement. To get to the front door when I was new, but even before Emily knew me in grad school, I could do that. I could get to my car in 5 minutes. But if I were to do that now, it takes a half hour because everyone stops and
Yeah.
talks to me, and students
Oh,
and coworkers and everything. And so, how does that impact the writer's life? Is we so Emily and I both have very full lives, and and to build this new organization with this podcast in lives that are full with uh like I don't know how Emily does it. We're gonna have someday in the future Pinar Tarhan come on. She's an author and talk about time management. I think she might be a good one for
that would be amazing.
that. And but mine, I have everything scheduled for 20 hours out of 20 because I don't sleep for 20 out of 24 hours, and but I leave 15-minute gaps to get from one place to the next, so nothing can
Mm,
go wrong, right? Nothing that my 15-minute gaps cannot take a half hour because I already have something coming up. And
yeah.
so that's the Mike Moretta effect, if you want to call it that. I've taught my students that before, and I've written Mike Moretta up on the board, and I've called it the Mike Moretta effect. Some guy that I knew 30 years ago is like
Yeah.
being mentioned on this podcast that we don't
That's
even.
official. Well, like that's official podcast vocabulary now.
Yeah.
The Mike Moretta effect.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And I have no idea where he is now, and my students certainly they weren't even born when I worked with the guy. And but it's a that's how every moment in your entire life impacts the moment right now. That experience of taking 45 minutes to get to my car is still impacts my life right now, and it
Hmm.
impacts my
Yeah.
writing and impacts my schedule as a writer. And I learned that from him.
So I write a lot of memoir, and so I especially relate to this because, well, and I've been through therapy. And like therapy, a lot of that is, well, why do I feel this way? Why do I think this way? And it usually has something to do with your past. And so memoir is often drawing on that. Um, where did I, like, what were these experiences in my past that have led me to the way that I think, the way that I feel about things? Um, the what have led to my fears or to the things that I'm stronger in. Um, so I'm curious too. So you don't really write any memoir, right?
Other than when I had to. So
Gotcha.
correct.
So
And
how do you draw from your life experiences in your writing?
so when you said that, we are pro therapy at Write Better Together, by the way.
Oh, for
And
sure.
when you said that, actually, I was anticipating how I was gonna. I didn't know you were gonna ask me that, but I was anticipating how I was gonna. What I was uh,
Oh,
gonna.
he's looking at his bookshelf again.
I'm looking at my bookshelf again. Um, so this is like I have two books by him, but we'll use this one. This is Bill Idelson's writing class right here, and
Mm.
so he's a TV writer. He wrote like on he's gone now, but he wrote like on Andy Griffith and Get Smart
Oh,
and like
nice.
those old timey shows, and but they're shows you've heard of, and this is one of his students. Like he does have a book now. Tell him I'm looking at the bookshelf again. Um,
He's looking at the bookshelf again. This is the part of
that
the podcast where John Myers looks at his bookshelf.
me shaking my head that people can't see and looking at the bookshelf. So there's another one that also kind of has this book inside it, where he's reflecting upon those days. And one of his students wrote down everything that he ever taught in these sessions around a round table, and they were full of his life experiences that wind up in the writing room as a
Yeah.
writer. But what I mean, those were like from the 60s. Those were from for even when he was writing, it was before I was born, and when he started, and so he would call it psychoanalysis. You need to go to psychoanalysis, and because that's what they called it back then. And but he was a big proponent of it because you discover yourself and you learn about yourself, and every moment of your life that you've lived experiences this moment right now, and you're writing in this moment right now, and it helps you know who you are. So you're an observer of the human condition, but you're one of those humans, right? You're also an observer of your own internal condition.
That reminds me that actually today, so I taught a class today, and we're in the unit where my students are about to write a research essay on a short story, specifically about the like historical, social, economic context of the stories and the authors. And I think it's interesting to think about like how many articles are out there, like here's what Flannery O'Connor was going through at the time, and here's her historical context, and here's what shaped her stories. And I don't expect anybody to do that for my stories, but it's interesting to think about that for yourself. Like, what is it in my stories that were shaped by my own experiences and my historical context as well?
That's a good point. That like in a screenplay that's in 1903, if someone trying to think of an example really fast off the top of my head. So we live in this gotcha culture now where people like just look for mistakes, right? And so in a screenplay, someone pulls out a folding chair. So this is true. This is a true example from one of my screenplays. Someone pulls out a folding chair. I have to make sure folding chairs existed in 1903, which they did, right? Because someone's going to challenge that and go, they didn't have folding chairs back then. But guess what? That example actually happened, and I already knew that it did because it was patented in 18 whatever, but they became popular in 1901 or 1902. So a normal person would have a folding chair. A normal civilian would have a folding chair in 1903, where 5 years earlier, maybe only a church or a school might have folding chair, right? So you have to know that stuff, and
that's why I don't write historical fiction. That's why I write fantasy. I don't have to back up anything. I just made it up. Except
that's a good point.
Well, maybe even in fantasy you can play with physics too, but you have to be like clear about it.
Yeah, that's a good point. My first reason, this is a different episode, but my first reason is because you don't have to deal with cell phones because there aren't any, and so I don't have to knock out all the cell phones and whatever. But like, I don't want you to think I'm writing like war movies or anything like that. They're all like rom-coms and comedies, but they just, and not everything I've written has taken place back there. But I've written three different things from 1899 to 1908, and maybe 4 things, and so I just kind of know like pop. I call it pop because I'm from Chicago, but soda pop was invented during that time, and cream cheese is becoming popular during those time. And so I know all those things, and it's also a shortcut now because I know like. If I were to write something about 1945, well, what do I got to start all over. I don't know what's happened in 1945. Oh, there was a war. All right.
Yeah, we have different experiences too, just being like in a different generation, like growing up, like being kids at different times. And it makes me think too of our our episode 0, you talked about cultural inventory. So sometimes our cultural inventory isn't just our experiences either. It's like the media that we consumed. And
Well, so that was the bow that I was going to put on this, was that.
Oh, I stole it. Sorry.
No, I like that you stole it. That's so the media version of every moment that you ever lived in your real life impacts this right now is your cultural inventory, because every bit of media you've ever consumed, every radio show, every TV show, every song on the radio, every bit of advertising. So you have one in your human life and in your personal interpersonal relationships, and then you have one in your the amount of media that you consume.
Yeah. I love it. So, our call to action today is related to what we just talked about. So, we want you to reflect on how everything has led up to now and write a creative piece about it. So, write a creative piece about how something has led to now. Am I saying that right?
Yeah,
Okay. So it can
exactly.
be, yeah, it can be a short fiction piece, it can be a poem, it can be a short memoir piece, and share that with us. We've been focusing on mostly on the Facebook page. So if you want to go to the Facebook page and respond to our call to action, you can do it there. Or if you prefer, if you want to be more private, you can email us at writebettertogethernow@gmail.com.
Like we said last time, we would love for them to all be in one place, but they're not,
Yeah,
and
it's
we're
just not
fine
like
with
you can respond
we're
to
fine
me
with
too.
that. Yeah.
Whatever's convenient.
Yep. We don't want to have any platform be a stumbling block to someone else,
Yeah.
and so yeah, we're fine with wherever you want to put it. We'll find it eventually,
Yeah.
and
And we'll share it.
yep.
Oh, and that reminds me too. So, if you do want to share your your social media page that you want people to see, or a book that you've written, or a movie that you've produced, like share that with us, and we will link that in our show notes.
And we're also eventually not in the next month, but on we'll have a self promotion day like on a Tuesday or whatever,
Yes.
where you can put your links to your stuff on our
Yeah.
page. But we're not ready for that yet, so calm
Yeah.
down. All right.
Alrighty, everybody. So this is where I say to like and subscribe,
Oh yeah.
because it helps us grow our community. It helps people find our podcast, and especially if you want to write a review on the podcast listener that you're listening to, that really helps other people find us. So we very much appreciate it.
That so I've just started into a story that I only know half the details. I'm like, I should slam on the brakes and not tell the story. So I was reading about how things get boosted. So I've done a narrative fiction podcast called Edwina Bergman Radio Ventriloquist, and I wound up on some top 10 lists,
Ooh,
and but and it's okay. It's popular, but it's not like a million listeners or anything like that. And so I was trying to figure out how I did that, and it really the thing that boosts it, and every service probably isn't the same. So that's my caution why I shouldn't have started telling this story. But the thing I read was when you share our podcast, that like that's like super steroids for the podcast right?
oh,
So liking and commenting we love, and we want that too, and so keep doing that. But if you like one share, I'm oversimplifying this, but one share is worth like three of everything else. And
awesome.
but again, I'm oversimplifying that. And but when so anyway, there you go. That's what I was gonna say about that. So yeah, ring the bell, smash. What do they smash? Go go do
The
what?
toaster, I don't.
Smash the toaster. Go out to your mailbox. Put the little red flag up on the
Yeah.
mailbox that tells the postman to stop by and listen to podcasts. I think that's all we had to say about ring the bell. Oh.
All right, what do you got for me today?
We talked about this, but we didn't talk about. Oh, are you still gonna do the other? We're still gonna do the other one. So I'll
Yeah.
shake this for a little longer while Emily thinks of another one.
Okay. So I'm supposed to have a hot take.
Yeah, we didn't say that.
I
Uh,
this keeps happening where I'm like, am I doing a hot take? And then I forget if I'm doing a hot take. So, today's hot take is oh, I have one. Okay, so in the last episode we talked about how we feel about the write what you know thing, because it is controversial. Do you think we should write what we know, or I, or we do more than that? I don't know.
I just like to point out I've gone 40 minutes and I didn't do the shaking my head thing
Yeah.
until just now. And but I almost did it because when you said, "Do you think?" I was gonna shake my head at which one I think, and I didn't do it.
Mm.
Um, so the call
Talk
to
about
action is do you believe in write what you know, or do
yeah,
you think it's something else?
yeah.
Okay,
Just share your thoughts in the comments of wherever you're listening,
wherever you find us.
wherever you can
Um,
find us.
all right, and then um, the it's I like that Emily like had to think of it off the top of her head, and so don't think that that's a negative or that I was forcing her to do that.
Okay.
It's good. This a final moment is eventually gonna end up being in your hands, viewers, listeners,
Yes.
and so we we like that we like how this. I like how this is happening, and but here's something Emily doesn't like. Ready?
All right. Um, A.
So I'm reaching it. This is you don't know if you're listening that
Oh
this
yeah.
sound is the mystery bag, and it's full of tiles. There are 100 tiles, and two are blank. So there's 98 tiles in there. They all have letters on them. Emily has picked A. What if this is A now?
Oh man.
Oh no. I'm also afraid that this is becoming like I feel bad if she keeps missing them.
Don't feel bad. It's not your fault. Ah, it's
You
F.
just got an F though.
Oh,
now I feel
that's
now
even
I feel
worse.
really bad. But you got 4 points.
Fail.
But you didn't get it. But you didn't guess it. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. I feel
Yeah.
so bad now.
And do I get negative points now?
Ooh. Someone at home, keep a tally of how many points Emily has not received
Yeah, it's
and
like
put it
7 or something.
and put it in the comments. And so another fine episode
Mm-hmm.
is under our belt, and this time even though like we told the David story, there are other things that we reflected upon from the previous episodes,
Yeah.
and so we can genuinely say that this episode we
We
couldn't
couldn't have
have
done
done
it
it without you.
without you.
There you go.